Hey, welcome to the final episode of Phil John's VIP. Thank you all for joining me tonight. I appreciate it. Tonight is just going to be a fun-filled evening. I'm starting my show a little early tonight because we got Rebecca Dupas, the Wind Down with Bex, starting at 7. Right after that, I'm coming back at 8 p.m. for my eggnog toast with Rebecca Dupas and also some of the brothers from the Gentleman's Corner. And at 9 o'clock, it's on and popping. It's cutting up for the holidays with the brothers from the Gentleman's Corner. And we're just going to have a good time. Tonight is nothing but must-see IG Wednesday nights, and we're going to have a good time. So please stay tuned. Right after mine, Rebecca will come on. I'll come back at you guys at 8 o'clock. Gentleman's Corner will close us out at 9 o'clock until whenever. That's just how we're going to do it tonight. It's going to be until whenever. But to get things started, thank you for a second season of Phil John's VIP. I am so blessed to have this opportunity and to be given this platform to do one of the things that I love to do, and that's to celebrate other people. And as always, I love to close out with something and a guest that will center us all. I love to be in the spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving. And for that, I've invited my brother, Pastor Timothy Whetstone-Espada, to come on. Me and Pastor Tim have known each other since we were in grade school, since the first grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And he is now in ministry, and I want him to come on and talk about that, and I want you guys to get to know him and see what he's doing and follow him and support what he's doing, because he's doing a lot of good things on college campuses. So without further ado, I want to get this night started by bringing my brother on. And let me see, did he invite me? Tim, did he send a, yeah, he did. Here we go. Let's get it started. Brother Pastor Tim.
How
How
is it
are you?
going?
What'd you say?
It's so good to be with you, man.
It's good to be with you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you doing? Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, happy holidays to you too. I am doing well, thank you. It's full force right now with holidays and being on an academic calendar. It's
Yeah,
winding down for our students, and it's kicking up with my kids. So,
I
that's just
know.
great.
And I thank you for, I know tonight is a big night for you as well. I know your schedule is heavy. And I know that, thank you for making the time to have this, because I really wanted to just get you on and talk to you about everything that you're doing. And just to give a little backstory for everyone. We were in grade school, but the grade school that we went to was a Christian school. So I had this conversation earlier with my cousin, and I was saying how, like, it's something that we kind of entered in. There was nothing that I knew outside of that until I really got to high school. So our spiritual and our Christian foundation is very deep. No matter how far away I went to explore other possibilities, I always came back to what my foundation, my roots were. So just to give you a history, so he's not just some random guy I'm pulling out from saying, come talk to the people, but there is history here. So I wanted to know a little bit about your journey from that point. I know that Tim, I remember him being a very competitive kid and very I'm going to say passionate. I'm
Yeah,
gonna use that word. And from
you're
that point,
you're generous.
yes. So from that point, through high school and into college, I mean, tell us about your journey, your natural maturity and evolution, but also your spiritual one.
Yeah, sure. But first, I just want to thank you. Man, it is so good to see you. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm honored. Like it has been a long time since first grade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But no, I'm so thankful to be here with you and all your friends and people that are tuning in. I just really appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, I mean, I'll start just with like my DNA, right? So my mom's a 4'11" Puerto Rican from Puerto Rico. My dad's a 6'1" white dude from Long Island. and this is what you get, right? Like you get this. And so, I mean, that's the beginning of my life, right? And I got one sister, and she's a lawyer and now a professor, and we both kind of went into higher education as well. But our journey, like our formation, as you talked about, you know, began as kids in New York City, growing up in Flushing, Queens. And that's kind of where we began. Like you, yeah, I was at Flushing Christian School, but then I hopped over to PS22 and then came back to FCA. And so my journey was both and my dad, though, he's retired now, but he's been a minister his whole life. So like I like to say, and I believe it fully, that I'm a recovering pastor's kid. And
Yeah.
I'm in that ongoing recovery for the rest of my life, right? Like my dad is still my dad, but he grew up as my pastor as well. And so I was shaped in that life and in that space, and shaped then with
And
a
I
Latina.
remember your dad. Wow.
Yeah,
Back
is
then.
super compassionate, which I think, as you mentioned, I'm incredibly competitive as a kid, right? Like, which I think I got from my dad and mom too. I mean, it's in my Latin blood for sure, but it's also in my dad, who was an athlete. But then I saw him being this incredibly compassionate human, like just
Yeah.
loved everyone in New York City, just loved them no matter what. I mean, I would wake up in a home that we had, you know, he would take in people, whether they were ex-cons or they were homeless or they were a college student that was stranded in the US. Like they showed up in our house. Like that's what I grew up with. So while I was this competitively and also seeking and searching kid, which I did a lot of through my high school years, especially when we moved away from New York and I finished up high school in Michigan, that was like the beginning of my who am I journey. Like
Yeah.
I moved away from a multicultural, multi-ethnic, you know, urban setting to a small town where I just felt like I didn't fit in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And so that began my journey. Like, well, where do I belong? Like, who am I? What does this look like? Like, am I still, you know, mixed race? Like, do I fit here or do I fit there? And it just didn't seem. And yet that was the journey. That was the beginning of seeking and trying to find out that that kind of essence of who I am, right? And all the time had this dad and mom, like a very, very, very strong praying Latina mom, right? Like that's what I saw every morning was her on her knees and her at the table and feeding me and then praying and then feeding me and then doing set cleaning and then feeding me. Like it was always feeding me. Like I just,
Do
that's,
I?
like, I mean, that's what you do. You walk into a Puerto Rican home, you eat. So we ate a
Yeah.
lot, right? But yeah, so I saw that, and I saw in my mom, and I saw this in my dad, and that's kind of what I came back to as I moved on to college, which is actually I'm back in the town that I went to school. My undergraduate was in Boise, Idaho. So that's where I'm in right now. That's where I live now for the last 6 years. My 3 kids are growing up here. My wife's from Northern Cal. We met while I was in grad school in Kansas City. And so that journey then, you know, college was kind of really formative for me. Like, what am I going to do? I was going into pre-med. And then last minute, my senior year, I kind of switched, feeling that it wasn't med school where I was headed. But I knew it was something to do with caring for people, because I think this is when it happened, was in college while I went on a soccer scholarship. So my competitiveness did well, man. Like it paid off. Like it paid tuition.
Why not? Why not? Absolutely.
But I apologize for the competitiveness that may have moved to like the wrong way when we were kids. But in the end, it paid. Right. So, but it was there in college that I began the shift. Like, yeah, I can still remain competitive, but it doesn't have to be negative competition. Like it can I can actually be a compassionate person too. And I think that kind of when the transformation in my life began to happen, and I credit it to friends and to family and to like what I mentioned earlier, my mom and dad, who I know just continue just to model, not pressure me, and just continue to point me beyond themselves, which I've kind of taken that motto on from my dad, which is pointing beyond ourselves to Christ and to places of healing. And that's what that's kind of where it began. And with it, I went on to grad school, got a couple masters, and met my wife. It's been wonderful. I served in international mission work and disaster response for 10 years. We lived in Italy. We lived in Singapore. We lived in this little country down known as Alabama. Yeah, so there. That was after Katrina. And so we served in different ways, just caring for people, right? Like what I like to call, reestablishing hope after just disasters. You feel hopeless. Like we're living through one right now, right? Like
Absolutely.
Pandemic and so forth. A lot of us just feel that hopelessness of like, where's the end, and when can I get back to eat, and things like that. And so I spent just over a decade in that sort of area of ministry for a long time, and then moved into, which was, I think what you mentioned is a great word. It was an evolution, because I never felt called to pastor like my dad, a local church, but it kind of evolved into that. And while we came back from Singapore, honestly, to take care of my dad, who had several heart attacks, and we came to take care of him and my mom. And during that time, praise God, he's still alive. He's retired now, lives close to my sister and her family. So that's wonderful.
That's good.
It's just a great thing. But it was in that time that I began to sense this movement to like actually kind of care for a flock, like we would say, like this kind of shepherding sort of thing. And I moved into that for a few years. And it was then that that flock kind of grew into a call to be a chaplain at a university in San Diego. And so I was pastor and chaplain at Point Loma Nazarene University for several years. I loved it. That's kind of where the movement into higher education and teaching and educating, as well as continuing to pastor. And it was really these sort of just movements in my life, this drawing. And I kind of come back to this idea, which I think kind of summarizes it all, and just my journey, what you mentioned, this, or what you were asking about, is that, I feel as though God has revealed God's self to me through different ways. Like I feel God can do any way God wants to. But for me, experientially, it's been through others and through opportunities. And it's in those spaces that I felt drawn, because I'm really good. And this, like being competitive, I can drive myself. Like I can be driven to get a goal done, to get something done. I mean, that's partly being from New York too, right? Like we just get it done, right? Yeah. And so I can drive myself to do that. But the older I get, the more I realize a lot of times my drive may not be God's drawing.
Right. Absolutely.
So I have to weigh that. I have to see, is this drive really a selfish drive, or is this drive actually to serve others? And when I begin to see that it is serving others, then I go, okay, that's a decent drive. But most often I've seen God draw me into spaces, which could be actually an individual on a subway in Singapore, at a bar in Rome. Like it could be that sort of drawing, like that person needs someone to say hi to, or that student at Point Loma, I think he needs me to sit with him at lunch. Like we need to go and grab a coffee, or I need to create space for that student to just unpack what's going on in their life. And so that's kind of been how God has moved me. And I've pastored, and now I work for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, which where we serve over 800 campuses in the U.S. And I'm just honored, man.
Well, let me ask you a question. Take it back a little bit, because you've unpacked so much. With you being multi-ethnic, and I say that because it's something that I think that a lot of people who are multi-ethnic deal with, right? Was there ever a conflict for you in trying to prove your Latino side, as opposed to walking in the room as a white man? Or was there things where you felt like, no, I need to speak up about this? No, you got it wrong, because you had the privilege of showing up just based on the way you looked.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, that's such a loaded question. Yeah, and it's such an important and good one. I think just backing up, like I said, you know, Michigan, when we moved there, that was kind of the first instance. And granted, I was a teenager, 17, right? So I was beginning to think a little bit. I wouldn't use the word mature because I was 17, but
Right.
a bit mature than a young kid growing up in New York City, right? And it was then that I was faced with the reality of the color of my skin, right? That I was faced with that I am white, but I'm not. and yet, and so there's a lot of privilege that comes with me just having the skin color that I have and being able to walk into a room to get a job, to whatever it is. There's we could go there if you want, but it was then that to kind of go back to the first part of your question, a reality shaping moment for me that has continued, right? It was the realness of recognizing that I'm fully this, but I'm also fully Puerto Rican.
Absolutely.
And so there's I love to tell this story about, you know, and I think a lot of us mixed race kids, we experience this of the TOO, right? The two something. Oh, well, you're too, you're like, and we get it from New York, right? Like, well, you're
Yeah.
too fast paced, or you're too
Yeah.
northeast, or you're too cold, or like, well, you're just too Latino right now, Tim. Like
Yeah.
me trying
Right.
to talk about privilege or understanding who I am. Like, no, you're too white right now. Like there's a lot of TOO that we get as mixed race kids. And so what that does, like, at least for me, I speak for myself internally, that does shift me to this posture of like, well, there's this imposter syndrome that I could go to, like, right. And in, you know, and I compare myself to someone else, like even my sister, right, who's got the curly hair and the dark skin and the Latina swag and like speaks fluent Spanish. And I was the lazy Puerto Rican son that responded in English to my mom all the time.
Right.
Now I'm older, I speak better. I speak Italian as well. Like, I mean, I'm older, but that's what I grew up. So there was always this pressure of like, well, I'm not as good as my sister. I'm not as Latino as my sister. Like there's this, I could go there, right? But the older I get, I realize like there's always going to be this TOO for somebody and for something, right? People are always going to push the choose something on us. And so I have to embrace that actually I'm not too anything for God.
Absolutely.
Just perfect for God.
I
Now,
know. I'm sorry.
no, and that's what I was going to say. And that's what I've come to embrace.
Right. Right. I know that, you know, throughout my journey in life, there was a time where I felt like I just could not get it right spiritually. I just couldn't get it right. So I remember there was a time where I said, well, you know what? If I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to go out with a bang. So I'm just going to go out and I'm going to do whatever I want. And I always tell people that it was in the times when I was not going to church. There was times when I just wanted to get away from that whole community is where I found God. That's where I discovered God, away from that, you know, in the midst of me trying to figure it out. So the
Right.
second conflict I wanted to ask you about, was there ever a moment where you had to say, well, you know, where you struggled with, you know, I see that this is the path that was laid before me, but is it really for me? And was there ever a conflict or a tug of war of, should I go into ministry? Should I do this or should I not?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. I'll just say that, you know, I think that's the beautiful, or the beauty of the journey, right? There is this definite, there are these definite moments. At least the older I get, the more I see that those moments don't end either, that we continually have these moments of decision, sure, but even more of formation. And so like I could be totally informed about who I am. Let's go back to my mixed race, right, for a second. Like I could be totally informed, like, yeah, this is who I am. This is my DNA makeup. This is where I'm from. Like I know my Enneagram. I know my Myers-Briggs. I know this. I know that. Like, but it doesn't form me, right?
Yeah.
Like it informs me, absolutely. Like it's information that helps me and that can help me be a better person. Absolutely, I totally believe that. but there are formational moments where we have to step into a space that we may not we may be fearful of, or we may not even understand. And it's, I think what you're talking about for me, yeah, it was these moments where, for example, we moved to Michigan, and my dad thought this was it, like this is going to be a good move, it's going to be a good place. It turned out it was not a good place for my family. Like, and it was really hard for my mom, like really hard, and really hard for my sister. I had sports kind of to lean into, so so there was that for me, and but it was still very difficult for me trying to figure out where I fit in. And it was then I walked around, I'm like, all right, God, like if you seriously love me, then you'll reveal yourself to me somehow. I don't honestly care how it is, because if I believe anything, like, is that you can reveal yourself in whatever way. And it may be through a person, it may be through a talking ass. Like, I honestly don't care. It could be from anywhere. And it was through the love of my dad and my mom just saying, we're here for you. We know this is difficult. We know this isn't what we expected. We're praying for you. Now, personally, I gave up praying.
Right.
Like, I just, now the older I get, the more I realize my conversations with God at that time were probably more like prayers than most prayers I did before then. I mean, if I look at the book of Psalms and David and read some of those prayers, I'm like, man, he was bold.
Right.
Like,
Right.
he put it all out there, calling down fire on his enemies, and God can handle it. And
Right.
so I look at, I think back to those sort of times where I think I walked away from God, but I realize my petitions, my cursings of God, they were prayers in a different form. And it was formational for me to realize that God still stuck with me during that time. God was still with me, even if I didn't want to recognize him. And yet I had to go through that period of deconstruction. I had to go through that period of distance from the institutional sort of church. I had to distance myself from even my parents. But even in the distance that were relational, like my parents or my friends, they stuck with me. And I have to, well, I mean, I have to thank God for that, but I also have to applaud them, because I can be a difficult person. And so for them to continue to love me, that demonstrated a love that was beyond them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's what drew me back to following Christ. That's what drew me into just this relationship with Christ that I want college students to know. Like, I want them to know that a hope that's real. So
tell me about InterVarsity. Like, what does that all entail, and what led you to that movement?
Yeah, that's that's a kind of funny story. So part of my journey was actually leaving full-time ministry here in Boise. I left full-time higher ed, moved to Boise to help a friend restart a church, actually. So kind of church planting again. And it was a short-term assignment. We knew this, and it was a 2-year thing. And so the 2 years ended, and we didn't see a way for me to continue in ministry there, because they were going a different way, and they were expanding their staff. And I kind of sensed that it wasn't for me anymore, being there. But I didn't know what. And so I walked away from occupational ministry.
Right.
As I like to say it, not vocational. I still wanted to love people, care for people, point them to hope and peace. But I was out of occupational ministry. My wife got a new career in digital media marketing, and so we were able to stay here in Boise, and just provisional that way. My kids, I'm like, I don't want to move. I don't want to uproot them. So this was a 3-year journey, honestly. And it was a day that I got a text from my wife, and I got an email from an old college friend, the same job description application, said, hey, I think you would be perfect for this job. And I was like, oh man, it's back in occupational ministry. I kind of was like, I'm done with that. But I read through the job description, and I was like, wow, I resonate. Like, I like this. Oh, I really like that. Oh, I love to create. It's brand new. Oh, okay. I'll call the person in charge. And so I did, the VP, and talked to Greg Howe, and it was just a wonderful talk. And I just said, here's where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking. And things moved pretty quickly from there. And I was offered the position to be National Director for Church Engagement. And January of 2020, I accepted February 2020, and then March 2020 hit. And
I
so,
remember speaking about that.
yeah, we
and
all
and
know.
the excitement you had about bridging the gap between higher education and faith.
Yep.
And, but I just want to ask you a question. Now, most kids go to college. You know, that's their time to experience and explore things that are beyond what they are used to at home. You know,
Right.
you go away from your family, you're away from your family norms, you're away from the culture, and it's your time to explore, right? With InterVarsity, it seems like you're trying to make sure that they have a space that if they want to continue in practicing their faith, that there's a space for that. And then even once they leave college, whatever city they're going into, there's something that they can be directed to in order to practice there. I guess the question that I'm asking is that, has there ever been a time where students are still, like I said before, in your journey, kind of struggling or in conflict with being away from home, have the freedom now to, I mean, because I remember being in taking a class in college where it was a religious studies class, and there were so many things that were brought up that I never heard of. It was just like, there were things that were being questioned that I was always told never to question. It caused me to start to think and question things that I didn't even think that were appropriate at the time. So there's things coming at them from different areas. How
Right.
do you keep them focused? How does InterVarsity provide a safe space for students to say, you know, we are all of like mind here?
Yeah. So I'll back up with just saying it's the actual intentional desire to create space for them, safe space, right? That's something that we know biologically, even we need as people. Like, we need those safe spaces as humans, right? And man, I'm spinning with, memories of my own college years, right? I think we think about that, or even just that age, not necessarily even having gone to a college. It doesn't matter, that age, those 4 to 6 years are incredibly formational as humans, right? Incredibly formational, especially as we distance ourselves from the space where we grew up in, or our parents, if we have those, or guardians or friends, like, we distance ourselves, and there's a whole lot that takes place. So in a varsity, we know that students are going through this change in time. But I will say this: there's 3 major things that, having been in higher education now for over 12 years now, full time and then part time, and then I also taught in Singapore as well with students there. And I would say even globally, there's 3 major things that we know takes place in the formation of students during that time, and the formation of those years. And one is the recognition that we begin to kind of have this deep desire to understand who we really are, right? It's not only a who we were, like, that we deal with, like, whatever, if it's religion, if it's, the person, if it's our ethnicity, if it's socioeconomic status, whatever it was, we deal with the who we were. And we look towards the who we want to become, right? Like, I mean, that's part of going to get an education, is like, I want to get this degree so I can make money for do this, or I can go in the medical field or be a nurse or whatever, like, right? So there's this past and there's this future. But what students really need is the present. And so InterVarsity recognizes, like, we want to be in the presence, or be a presence in the present, right? We want to provide space for students to navigate faith and life. And most students come, you know, and there's a lot of data out there right now of how spiritually minded Gen Z is. Incredibly spiritually minded, seeking to understand. Within the seeking and to understand, their
They're
spirit
exploring heavily.
exploring, right?
Yeah.
And they're more open and honest than any generation of their mental health and self-care. Right. Not that previous generations weren't aware of it, but Gen Z is very much open about it, right? And that's helping us older generations. I know that's helping me as a Gen Xer, right? Like,
right.
We just wanted, you know, to be negative.
I don't always understand their level of spiritual seeking. But I do know that I feel like they have more of a freedom to explore it than we did.
Yeah, and the desire to share that too.
Yeah.
But what we also recognize, so there's the second thing is, we know that there's still a maturity level where they need safe space, to not to share everything. Right. But to be able to have people they can confide in, people that can help them navigate that collision, that mingling of faith and life, that space where the both and happen, which, you know, as mixed race kids, we understand both and really well, right? Yeah. And honestly, mixed race is the fastest growing demographic in the United States right now. And so there is a lot of both and taking place. And so there's a both and in their faith as well as the both and in life. And those all are colliding in these collegiate years. And so we at InterVarsity, man, we want to see transformed lives. So we want to create space that allows for students to be transformed, because we believe that not only is the individual life in need of transformation, we just need it, right? Like, it's not something that we can impose on ourselves. Like, transformation takes place over time, and understanding of ourselves, understanding of faith, understanding of Christ, and how I like to say it is how love was visible through Jesus. Like, that to me is the essence of Christianity, is that Jesus is love, that God is love, and it was demonstrated in flesh. So transformed lives, we believe it transforms communities. So for example, the campuses, like, it changes things. I mean, if you look back in history, all the great awakenings, all the movements, whether they were spiritual movements or major justice movements, they took place amongst young people and on campuses that were flamed, right?
Absolutely.
And so we know that those are spaces where a lot of amazingly good can happen. And so when lives are transformed, communities are transformed, and world changers are developed, because we know that the university life, those 4 years, it's short-lived, right?
Absolutely.
It is a season, and there are more seasons in life. And so we at InterVarsity, and my role too, is, you know, we want to not only provide that space for guides to help them navigate that faith in life, and particularly a faith in Christ, absolutely, but how that plays out and how we serve, how we, as the prophet Micah would say, how we do justice, how we love mercy, and how we walk humbly.
Pastor Tim, listen, I hear you, but, you know, I can't help but think in my mind, like, how can someone say, well, you know, how with everything that's going on in the world now, where people are kind to open up to kind of like inclusivity, and people don't want the exclusivity that the church has had for so many years. Like, how will we let people know that, yes, how would InterVarsity, to be more specific, let people know that, yes, you're all welcome, like, we include you as well?
Like, help me understand the how. Like, I mean, because, all right, well, let me back up first and then correct me if I'm not following the question, because I think I understand your question. The how, honestly, so we do have a structure where it's student led as well. So so I think the how is done relationally, because students are students, right? And they're going to invite their friends to this space. They're the ones that are going to gauge whether or not this space is a safe space, an inclusive space. They're the ones that are going to say to their friends, yeah, no, or no, come, Like it's going to be either or. And so that's like our model of how. So we have what we would call campus ministry. Like I'm not one of those particularly in a place, but what I used to be was that on a campus, was a campus minister. And so we have a pastor that kind of shepherds those students that that follow, that say, that want to say that, yeah, we're Christians and we want this space to navigate faith and life and how to figure out how to live, right?
Mhm.
But the invitation is just broad for InterVarsity. It's for anyone.
Right.
Now, our groups then take shape in different ways. So we have Black Centered Ministries, BSM. We have Asian American Ministries. We have Latino ministries known as La Fe. We have Greek ministries. We have athlete ministries. We even have in our Big Ten schools, we have some marching band ministries. Like, and those, when I say ministries, what I mean is just small groups, right? And they meet, and so they are all led by students. So it's
Right.
student to student. So that's where the how takes place, if I'm understanding your question.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you and I know, I mean, like even in a local church, like we can say come, but it doesn't happen out of relationship.
Right. Right.
And so what we really believe at InterVarsity is also faith and life as they mingle, as they collide, and as we navigate it. It has to be done relationally, because in relationship, then formation is deep. And so that's the how.
Yes. Truly. So let me
Because
ask you something.
yeah,
Ask you something, Pastor Tim.
because
Do you
a
believe?
student's it's gonna be bold. They're gonna say yeah, no, or you're gonna say yes.
Yeah. Or in colleges, they will probably there will be conversations that will be had based on maybe differences of opinion, past experiences. They may not have been good for them. So I get it, because I think that's where it all happens, as it should be. I mean, that's what higher education is for, is to explore um, different things on a higher level, on a more mature level, intellectual level. I remember when I was in school, I took a class on the India and the Middle East, and my professor was Egyptian. He was raised Muslim, but he was an atheist. And I remember he would throw stuff out to the class, and everybody would just be like, just and because he wasn't personally or emotionally connected to it any longer, but it provided conversations to take place that we were all able to learn from.
Right.
You
And,
understand?
and part of
Yeah.
what happens with the how, kind of the extension of that how is,
Mhm.
when students gather and a campus minister gathers, and they gather for Bible study, or they gather for worship, or they just gather for an event, or they gather just to talk, or they go out to a bar and grab some drinks, and they gather and they are just together. There's always this recognition that, this is a space where we can have courageous conversations.
Mhm.
Like we can try and unpack together what it means to be not only in relationship with one another, but in loving relationships with one another and to the rest of our campus. They recognize that that it's not just one shape or one mold or one method. Like that's not conversation, right? Like that's not
Right.
relationship. They're
Right.
they're evolving, they're expanding, they're changing, they're dynamic. And so that's one thing I love about InterVarsity. And personally, I get to be involved at Boise State University, which is just down the street. I get to be a part of students there. We had 4 students over at Thanksgiving. They just, they joined us because they were here. They didn't leave. They didn't go home, and they hung out with my kids. They were part of our
Right.
family today. Like, and they had courageous conversation. They asked deep, hard questions that I had to say sometimes,
Well,
like,
well,
I
let,
don't
let
know.
me let me let me let me just say this publicly about. Let me say this publicly about you. I think that and why I was just dead set on having you on, because you're one of those people who I feel have always been very open and about, when I say open, I mean not non-judgmental, but always open, and kind of like what I would call a present day pastor. That you fully understand what's happening, you fully understand what everybody's facing, and everything that you've touched always comes from a place of openness and love and non-judgment.
Oh man, you're so kind, man.
So I appreciate that, and that's why it's like, no, I gotta have you on. I gotta, and I'm able to, a lot of things, a lot of questions I ask, I kind of know what your answer is going to be, but I just need for you to verbalize that
Yeah. Well,
in the way, only the way that I know you know how to.
yeah. I mean, this kind of brings a reality that people can change. Like a first grader New York City boy like me can actually turn out okay. Like,
Man, I tell you, Pastor Tim once upon a time made me cry.
I'm so sorry, man.
But it's all good. I'm gonna get to my 5 questions that I ask every guest that log on. But before, I have one that's been playing over and over in my head since you've been talking, and I just want to get your answer on this. Do you believe that we as human beings are co-creators of our own reality?
Oh, I love that question. I love it. I don't use the word creator as much. I use co-author just because I kind of stick with the language, but I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what you say. So my initial answer is yeah. I believe we are co-creators, co-authors in writing the script of our lives. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's similar to what I was talking about, drive and draw, right? I think sometimes we get into the narcissistic idea that we have to write everything.
Right.
And we want to solo write, which means like for someone who's married like myself and as a dad with 3 kids, I can get there and I end up writing my kids and my wife out of the script, and that's wrong. There's no co-authorship. Like my wife has some really good ideas about how I should be a better person. Right?
Right.
And so I need to receive that. So yeah, and then in my faith, I believe God invites us into that co-creation. I mean, biologically, I mean, we birth people, primarily our women, right? Like they have this divine, beautiful ability to do that, and we get the opportunity to co-create and bringing about spaces of hope and love. And I mean, not to preach too much, but I mean, I just look at Jesus and he said, be peacemakers, makers. So we are to co-create spaces of peace. So yeah, I totally believe it, man.
Right. Thank you for that, man. Because it's a question I always, not always ask, but I wanted to ask because, I back in the day, I've read a lot of Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, and there's so much language that I find that is used that can also be applied to scripture. So when I ask it in that way, I'm always curious to what Christians will respond, how Christians will respond based on, because a lot of things they say is you can always apply to scripture. You read what you sow. Whatever you put out into the universe comes back. Whatever you say manifests. Be careful what you speak, or it'll happen. Life and death is spoken with the power of the tongue. All of that it's all interchangeable, but people will listen to them, but they're like, nah, I don't really like the Bible. But if you read the Bible, it's kind of the same. What he's saying, exact same thing. It's just we get caught up in language, So it's always good to hear it. Back to you. First question: What do you know about the ministry now that you didn't know before you entered?
Oh man. I would say, so I know a few things I think I know better than I knew before.
Mm-hmm.
And this may sound just crazy. And also when I think about it for myself, I think, man, I was just stupid when I was younger. But I think the thing I know so much better is about ministry is that at its core, in its essence, the top thing of ministry is relationship. It is so much about relationship. And loving relationships.
Right.
I think so often ministers like myself, whether youth or older, it doesn't matter. And the church itself institutionally, and I mean that ecumenically, I don't mean that just in one denom or whatever, across the spectrum, we get caught up in the doing,
Yeah.
in the programming, and we miss that the most important thing is in the being.
Amen.
And it's in being present with people. It's in loving people. It's in sitting at their beds when they're sick. It's going to the hospital. It's celebrating a quinceañera. It's being there for their parties and their graduations, and it's being. And that is the essence of ministry that I knew theoretically when I was younger.
Right.
But I missed it a lot. And I still miss it.
What advice would you give your 19-year-old self?
Slow down.
Ha!
Which is so hard, right? Especially at 19. You got so many goals.
Yeah.
I was a young guy loving dating.
Right.
Yeah. But I think there's so much in slowing down. And I don't just mean like stopping everything. That's not what I mean.
Right.
There's so much beauty in the world that we miss because we're moving too fast.
What feeds your spirit?
Yeah. So what's that?
What feeds your spirit?
Oh, man. So I think there's three major things. And one is my family. And I'm blessed. And I know that's a privilege. I know that I'm honored and privileged to have 3 kids and an amazing wife and a mom and dad still alive and a sister. Right. And like, right. I know that. But I mean, and also as a Latino, families are everything to us too. I mean, still a family, we own 2 houses on the same street in Jersey and Edison. So like, I mean, we still live together too.
Were you here for Thanksgiving?
No, I didn't make it back.
You didn't make it. Oh, okay.
We were supposed to be together, but we're always supposed to be together. But I think that's the one, to answer your question. Like, that's the big one, is family. And it feeds, like, even in the hard times, just having family present, whether it's weeping or laughing, it feeds my soul. I think the second thing is the outdoors. Growing up in an urban setting, I didn't know what I was missing until I saw mountains.
Right. And now we can't get you out of them.
Yeah. Now, hear me. I love coming back to the city. And we got to go have some Thai food. Thank you again. Like, I love being back in the city. I love it. But there's something about the outdoors to me that just feeds me. And just, I can be silent there. I automatically slow down, and I love it. And I think the third thing, honestly, is this was something I've learned, and it has become a discipline even in my life, is solitude, and silence. Like solitude and silence. And there was a priest, Henry Nouwen, he was a prolific writer. He actually was a professor at Notre Dame, and he finished off his years actually in a center in Quebec for those with disabilities, and that's where he finished being a priest. And he was just one of them there, just serving and shepherding. But he continued to write, and he talks about the first movement of people, of what we really need, that we don't know we actually really need, is this space of solitude and silence. And so I read that way back when in the 80s, and I didn't realize how important it was until years later, because it just kind of centers me. It sets me. It's something that I've tried to keep even in my daily rhythm, even if it's just a few minutes in the morning, because it's something that I need. Because there are so many noises, there are so many voices out there that I just need the silence. So Those are the 3. And it feeds me. Like, I'm ready, which is kind of weird to think that solitude can feed you for people, but it does. It sets me ready to actually be with people then.
It's true. It's the refueling stage, to put it
Yeah.
back. What do you want your legacy to be? What would you
Oh.
like your legacy to be?
So I want, sorry, there's a story that's floating through my head. You know, when I left Point Loma Nazarene University, I was asked that question so many times. Like, what do you want your legacy to be here? And it was from students, you know, students that I had mentored and just over coffee or whatever. And I said, if there's anything that I want you to remember about me is that I loved you. And that I pointed to places beyond myself for healing, for life, for flourishing. And I want that to be my legacy. I want my kids to know that I love them, but I didn't love them alone. I pointed them to places where they could receive good love, where they could flourish. I encouraged them to strive for goals and to go for it. And it was out of love. And I want my wife to know that. I want my friends to know that. I want those that I pastor and shepherd. I want students to know that I don't have it all figured out. I know I don't have even half of it figured out. But in that journey of just living and loving, is that I hope that's what people see. I lived a life of love. Whether and I've done some I've been honored to be a part of some amazing things, you know, being published or, you know, speaking in major places in Singapore and throughout the globe. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I keep like, what? This shouldn't be Timmy from New York City. Like, this shouldn't be me. Like, there are so many other people out there. But that's honestly not what I want people to remember. Like,
Right.
I want them to remember that I was a person that loved.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Last question. What are you grateful for?
Oh, well, this first off, honestly, and I don't mean that trite at all. This has been food and nourishment. It's been a space of flourishing for me. I'm grateful for this, man, and for your friendship and for our years. I'm grateful for what you do. I'm grateful to have another day to breathe. I do my best not to take for granted the inhaling and exhaling that I do daily. You know, that comes a lot from praying daily for friends that have illnesses that are chronic, that are forever. And I'm grateful to have, you know, a functioning body, and I'm grateful for so much. But I think I go back to the one thing I said earlier. You know, I have a tendency, part of it is my personality makeup, part of it's DNA, part of it is who I am just as a person. Is I have a tendency to, and I love to do this, I love to look back on memories. I love to look at old photos. I love to remember stories, you know, as a kid or as a dad or as a friend, college, like whether they were good stories or not, I still revisit them.
Right.
I love to look at the past, and I love to dream about the future. I love to create new things, and I love to strive for new creative expressions and to build things, honestly. And that's one reason I was in disaster response for so long, is to help rebuild and create new space for flourishing for people. But I have a hard time in the present, right? I do have a hard time to live in this day. And I think that's the space in which I'm such immensely grateful for, is the present. It's for today, for another day, for an opportunity.
Amen.
For a drink with a friend, for a dinner with my wife, for whatever. It's for today.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Oh, man, thank you. I'm so blessed. So grateful. Love it.
No, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You gave us so much food for the soul tonight. I appreciate that so much, and look forward to sitting down with you in person again one day, very 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 soon.
I'll
You
be
know,
out. I'll be
and,
out there this summer.
oh, this summer
If
definitely.
everything
I'm in
goes,
Jersey. You know, I'm in Jersey now,
yeah. So
so
you're
you
you're
know,
close to my family now. So
yeah,
yeah.
it's not too far. You know, it's not too much of a hike anymore because I'm out of Queens. But yeah, yeah, bro, I appreciate everything. We got to do this again, hopefully.
Yes. Well,
You
I
know,
appreciate the fight, man. Anytime. I love it. Thank you so much. And if
absolutely. And
people are,
I know you got to get to your daughter's graduation. So,
yeah, yeah. It just last. I mean, if
so
people are wanting to know more about InterVarsity, I'm always open to share
yes,
more.
yes, yes. Please, please, please.
Don't don't hesitate. Follow me. And we've got a lot of great things going on. Over 800 campuses in the U.S. We have
And I
a
also, just to
lot
let
of
everyone
work.
know who's watching, I'll also put the information for donations and all that stuff. The link will be right underneath this video. So please feel free to donate whatever you can to
Yeah,
the to this ministry.
appreciate it. Yeah,
Completely.
love it. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for
All
everything.
right, brother. Happy holidays. Many blessings in 2022, and we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, happy holidays to you and everyone on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Stay blessed, bro.
Bye.